Alright, so after last week's really awesome Resident Evil showcase where they showed gameplay for Resident Evil 4, we got some updates on Resident Evil Village, and we saw Reverse, which no longer looks like straight butt. It actually looks kind of cool and fun now. We do unfortunately have some rather bittersweet information in regards to a rather highly requested remake from the Resident Evil franchise. Before we get to that news, if you guys could click the like and subscribe button if you like what you hear, it would be greatly appreciated. So this news comes to us from noisypixel.net, and in it they held an interview with the producer of RE4 Remake, Yoshiaki Hirabayashi. And in this interview they asked him about the possibility of remaking Code Veronica. And in summation, he pretty much says that his main focus is on making RE4 the best possible experience for fans. And if the opportunity were to arise for Code Veronica, they would consider it, but there are no current concrete plans to revisit Code Veronica and give it that remake treatment, which is obviously some rather bittersweet news. Again, Code Veronica is pretty highly requested in regards to being remade. It's also probably the one Resident Evil that would benefit the most from actually getting remade. Its story and its characters are pretty outlandish, and the game itself is definitely considered to be one of the weirder Resident Evils in the franchise, which is saying something. It's also not really considered one of the main Resident Evils, which is kind of weird, because to me, it is one of the mainline Resident Evils, and I don't really see it as a spin-off, because it's got Claire in it, it's got Chris in it, and it deals with, fighting Umbrella. And there are some themes in Code Veronica that might have been slightly ahead of their time. You look at the whole gender identity thing with Alfred Ashford and the, creation of the two personas of Alfred and Alexia based on childhood trauma of losing one of the siblings. There's some really interesting opportunities there for storytelling and reshaping certain things. You look at a character like Steve Burnside, who is some wackadoo, who was really hard to get behind. He was really childish, but even he had some really dark elements to his story that I don't think they really fully touched on. The whole thing of his father basically being imprisoned and his family being imprisoned with him, and then coming across his dead father who has now been reanimated as a zombie, and he is forced to kill him and to confront him. There's a lot of really dark elements to that story that just kind of get glazed over and lost in translation due to that really outlandish nature of the entire story itself. And you look at where the Resident Evil Remake franchise is headed, they're doing this thing where they're taking all of the old games and making them darker and more grounded and slightly more realistic as you can be in regards to zombies and tyrants running around killing people, but it's definitely much more grounded. And I did a video a few months ago when the first Resident Evil 4 trailer hit, where I talked about this being a really cool opportunity to create a new separate timeline for the Resident Evil franchise. So you have that OG RE timeline with all of the old Resident Evil games leading up to Resident Evil 7 and technically Village. But now you would have this new remake timeline with the remake games only, a timeline that is darker, a little bit more serious, and a little bit more grounded, leading into Resident Evil 7 and Village. And prior to that, we've already had 1, 2, and 3 remade, and they're currently remaking 4. I think logically you kind of have to go to Code Veronica next, because what do? Do you just jump straight to Resident Evil 5 and remake that? Which, don't get me wrong, it is a great game, and playing that game through co-op is an absolute blast, and RE5 did sell really well compared to the other Resident Evils too. So remaking that somewhere down the line with that darker, grounded tone does make sense, but I really feel like at some point you gotta get to Code Veronica. But it's also, like I said, a really cool opportunity to kind of do a little bit of a do-over. So you've kind of reshaped the Resident Evil history with these remakes. Some things have changed, some characters are different, some story points have been reimagined. So why not take Code Veronica and have it take place simultaneously with RE4 Remake? You can even have like a cool little Easter egg moment where Leon gets that SOS from Claire, which he then refers to Chris so he can go and help Claire while Leon's doing his thing. And in doing so, you redo the story. You redo the story of Code Veronica to fit this new timeline. You redo 5, and you most definitely some point in time gotta redo Resident Evil 6, because that game was weird as hell and it almost killed the entire franchise. So why not take this opportunity, Capcom, to just create this new timeline that's got a slightly different story that is better. And speaking of games that may potentially get a remake, we have some really interesting news coming to us from Gamatsu in regards to an interesting trademark from Square Enix. So on October 13th, Square Enix in Japan trademarked the word symbiogenesis, which is the merging of two separate organisms to form a single new organism. Does that sound like anything you know of? Maybe an older game series called, I don't know, Parasite frickin' Eve? This trademark is leading people to think, holy crap, maybe we're getting Parasite Eve back. This is really cool. You look at the OG Parasite Eve and it was this really awesome mix of survival horror and RPG, which we hadn't really seen before. And it ended up becoming a cult classic that spawned one sequel. Yes, there's only 2 games in the Parasite Eve franchise, number 1 and number 2. Absolutely nothing came after number 2. There's never been a third Parasite Eve game. They've never even thought of making a third game. Absolutely nothing came after that one. Nothing at all. Not a single new game. Nothing. Okay, obviously there was the third birthday, which most fans would love to forget. I only bring that up because Jensen Ackles played a character in that game, and he's cool. He's from Supernatural. He was on The Boys. I'm a big fan, and he's pretty much the only good thing about that game. Other than that, nothing else more to talk about. But with that being said, this is really cool. So hopefully Parasite Eve does make a return and it's more in line with what we saw with those first 2 games and not that imaginary third game that came out on the PSP. Very much would like to forget that whenever happens. So that is pretty much the video. Please leave any of your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think about Code Veronica? Do you want it to get a remake? Do you think it deserves a remake as much as I do? And do you think this is a cool opportunity for Capcom to create a brand new Resident Evil timeline where they can reimagine that story and make it something a little bit more coherent and more grounded? And also, what do you think about this news that Parasite Eve may potentially be making a comeback in the form of a remake? Do you think it's going to be a Parasite Eve remake, or do you think it's going to be a TV show, or maybe a new book, or maybe, you know, some mobile game that is a battle royale? I don't know what the heck Square Enix is going to do with that property, but please leave any thoughts down below in the comments. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.